Yeah, buddy.
I
don't think it's
So what we're going to do is, this is hopefully will be a really interactive exchange tonight. I'm pretty excited by the turnout from the first responders side. Thank you for being here. What I'm going to do is, first of all, just a couple of housekeeping things, and then we'll turn it over to Christy to get started. If the alarm goes off, like a fire alarm, and we lose power to this room, I'm going to tell you right now, there's absolutely no lights in this room. It's happened once, it goes totally black. There you go. Okay, follow Lou. Please go ahead and get out to the front of the building where you came in, and we'll do an accountability check. So first responders, that's different. Usually I send you out the back door. Go all the way to the front, and then we'll do accountability, make sure we're not missing somebody. And then two, if you need a bathroom, I'm going to just take and say, just get up and go. Don't wait for a break. It's down the hall. It's on the right. There's men's and women's down there. These are locked up for the COs, so you have to go down the hall. Any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to DA Spread to kick us off.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming. 6:30 in the evening is a tough time to be here, especially during the work week when we have families and all sorts of other things going on. But it shows your dedication to what we're here for, and that's to help other people and to make our community safer. This training is basically put together as more of a collaborative cross, and you can see the cross sections of our communities. Each of us have different roles and different respective roles within our careers and what we are responsible for on a daily basis. And of course, I'm a prosecutor. We come from the prosecution side, but there's many first responders here that I recognize, law enforcement, child protective services, Office of the Aging. Do we have me? Patty. And I do see some from our Animal Abuse Prevention Task Force as well. We've been very proactive in Essex County on a number of areas, and thanks to Nikki and Michelle from my office, they sat down and decided to basically provide this training for us. And I want to thank them for their efforts of doing that. This is meant to be interactive, and that means you can raise your hand, you can ask questions, you can interject. This is a time to learn, and this is a time to ask questions and learn about each other and what our respective roles are. First responders, when they go to a scene, before today, you may not observe or document what you may need or we may need for court, and this is what we're here to learn about. So you may respond, basic EMS call, a person short of breath, respond to the household, and all of a sudden you're in there and you see maybe an animal that doesn't look very healthy or who's abused, a child with bruises, you're not knowing what to do, document. How do you document? What do I need to do? What do I look for? Who do I reach out to? What do I do with this information? And that's what we're trying to do here. And I know there's a lot of directors, there's a lot of resources online, but you know, when you need that information, you need it fast and quick. This is why we're here today, to gather that information, be more accessible, be able to refer people out for services when they need it. It may not always be a criminal case when you guys respond. It may not always be something where they're going to need further medical treatment, but they may need mental help, they may need other services, and that's what we're here for, to learn what your resources are and how to reach out. And this is going to be taped, so for those of you who know other individuals that wanted to be here and couldn't be here, we're going to try to put it on probably the county website. We have a district attorney's website as well as EMS, emergency services, so we'll try to make it accessible for everybody to watch afterwards. Housekeeping, we already went over that. You all know where the bathrooms are. And just ask the questions you need to ask. And again, thank you for being here, and we'll try to get this going and stay on time. Thank you. And just there's one change in the agenda. Let me just go over that. The first responders is going to move to the end of the agenda, and the first one will be Heather Haskins with the Office for Prevention of Domestic Violence, and I believe also in conjunction with Diane Dodd.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather. And as Christy said, I have a PowerPoint and slides, but this is a guide, and not everything will apply to everyone. So if questions come up, just stop me, because I like to use this as a guide, and sometimes we go completely off this topic until it's really important. So if something triggers a thought or a question, just stop me anytime, okay? But we are talking about animal abuse and in the context of domestic violence. few slides up here because we're talking about animals, and when we think about animals 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had pets. We had household pets. They were in the house. They were out in the yard. But now animals have become a huge part of everyday life, and it's kind of not debatable. I mean, they're in every facet. They're in hospitals. They're in schools. They are more than companions. You know, they're parts of the family, which is a wonderful thing. But also, when we think about animal cruelty and domestic violence, use of animals, they've also become a great way for abusers to extend the abuse through the use of pets and animals. So just to get started, talking about animal cruelty just in and of itself. Again, this is a little technical, but you have the PowerPoints as a reference, so you can look at them and think about them. But according to the Agriculture and Markets Law, animal cruelty is every living creature other than a human being whereby cruelty towards such beings includes every act, omission, or neglect whereby unjustifiable physical pain, suffering, or death is caused or permitted. So we kind of know what animal cruelty is in our own heads, but just to point out or reiterate that it's on the books, there are laws that deal with it. But these are some of the forms of animal cruelty that we might see every day, that we read about in the news, that we see when we go into homes or in communities. We see hoarding, we see dog fighting, overbreeding, pet stores, seeking profit, kill shelters, things like that. These are the sort of the everyday examples that we see of animal abuse. I'm sure you've all seen it in different levels, in different ways. The interesting thing about a lot of these, and I just sort of put it under dog fighting, they're often connected to other kinds of crime, and that's where domestic violence comes into. The intersections with other crimes, gangs, drugs, firearms. You'll often see a lot of these going on at the same time. And as Christy said, sometimes when you go into a home, you think you're going in for one thing, and you get a much bigger picture, I'm sure. So when we talk about the link with domestic violence and animal abuse, this is just something that is called the National Link Coalition, and I put references to all of these organizations at the end of the PowerPoint. But they do a lot of work, and they have a lot of really helpful tools and resources talking about the links between different kinds of abuse that go on, because really when you see one form of abuse, you want to be looking for other ones. You're probably going to find it. If you look for it, you'll find it. And everybody's at risk in a home where anyone is being abused. So that's, I mean, it's so basic that we often don't stop to think about it, but then, when you see it kind of in a visual, everything's overlapping and kind of intersecting. And the types of violence are the same for physical and animal victims, for human and animal victims. Physical, sexual, emotional, it can be neglect. So you're going to, again, see it in homes where abusers are abusing. So I put some statistics up here, again, not really important to go over at this point, but just to point out that, when we look at animal cruelty, we often see overlapping family violence in some form, because it's kind of a given. This statistic was actually from 2001, so if you fast forward that another 13 years, you're going to see an increase in that. How's everybody doing? Is anybody stopping for any? I talk fast, and I know I throw a lot of stuff, but so some of the ways that perpetrators use animals that you might want to be looking for if you're going into a home, you think you're there for something else, and they're using them to demonstrate power and control, which is kind of the hallmark of domestic violence, to further isolate the victim and children, and to enforce that submission. Basically, if you leave, I'll kill the dog. Or victims have left and the pet has been killed. So it's a convenient way for the abuser to keep victims from leaving or to make them return, to punish them for showing independence. And this is a really important one too. We see this a lot. We just had a case in my office that we dealt with where abusers will use animals themselves as weapons. They'll train them to attack, they'll reward them for attacking, and often what happens is the animals are hurt, so you've got an animal cruelty issue there, but then the animals are often labeled vicious or dangerous, and they're euthanized, or they're put in a kill shelter or an unsafe rescue. So you have really two kinds of abuse going on, the animal cruelty and the domestic violence, and the intersection of the two. Again, just some more statistics about, homes where a family member, in 69% of homes where there was animal abuse, there was also domestic violence, and that family members are 11 times more likely to be bitten by a pet in a home that also included domestic violence. Some of you might know Bob Passano. We were talking about him in the back, and he and I were actually talking about this. He's a retired police officer, and he was saying when he would go into homes, one of two things would happen if there was a pet. He said, first of all, there were never old pets in the homes. They were always puppies, or maybe 5, 6 years old at the most. He said they never lived long lives. They always looked very old. But he said either he would go in and everything would be in chaos, the victim would be upset, the perpetrator would be, violent, children would be screaming, and the dog was absolutely not reacting at all. And he would think, how is a dog not reacting to this? Because, my dog just freaks out when anything happens. Or the opposite would happen, everybody would be calm, the victim would have, be calm, the offender would have by then calmed down, and the dog was just absolutely out of control, barking and, freaking out and trying to attack. So he said one of two, just very inconsistent with the environment. Something to look for when you go in to say something's not right, something's not adding up. And abusers will often brag about the animal cruelty they've perpetrated. This is a quote from the National Coalition. Responses to abusive people and abusive animals are often similar, and that can be part of the challenge with dealing with animal abuse. They're not always apparent. These incidents often happen behind closed doors, as we say, and people don't always want to get involved or know how to get involved. They don't see what's going on. And we often respond instead of prevent, which is just common. It's the way that we act. We go in on a call, we try to respond to what's going on. And victims are often considered property, and they're blamed for the abuse. If a dog bites you, we're going to punish the dog. It's the dog's fault. If you have a dog who's constantly being violent, it might be worth, looking into. And we often do that with victims of domestic violence as well. Why did she leave? Why didn't she leave? Why did she stay? What did she do that could have, or what did he do, that could have caused the abuse? I put a little bit in here about children. Again, you can look more at the information that I gave you, but I like to use children as an example because the vulnerability is very similar. Children are considered expendable. They often lack the confidence in the adults to protect them, and basically they just can't always communicate what's going on. They're very vulnerable. They are sort of stuck in the house. They're stuck with the abuser. And very often they'll imitate the violence. So just as you might see a dog that's acting out or a pet that's acting out, a child may start acting out very early on. And what they found is that 58% of subjects exposed to animal abuse as children reported that there was some kind of domestic violence going on. So over half of the children who were exposed to animal abuse, there was family violence in the home. 50% of children will intervene and try to protect their pet. So what you'll often have is a child abuse issue because the pet was being abused. The child stepped in to intervene, which they'll often also do with the victim. They'll try to physically step between the abuser and the victim. In this case, they may try to protect the pet. So then you've got a child abuse. You may have injury at that point too. And again, just some more statistics about children, just to sort of reiterate the link between the two. Now this was really interesting, just sort of in terms of children injuring or killing pets. So what we talked about earlier about modeling behavior and decreased empathy for children who are exposed, they will often start hurting pets themselves. So again, what's causing what? It's just this vicious cycle where you have pet abuse and then the child is modeling behavior. And has everybody any questions at this point? Or okay. One of the things we talk about is risk assessment in domestic violence, and it's a really touchy issue because we don't always know who's going to be an abuser. And sometimes when we do risk assessments for domestic violence, we miss a whole host of potential abusers that are not showing any risk factors at all. So very cautiously, we'll say batterers who abuse pets are more controlling and use more dangerous forms of violence. That's sort of a statistic that was found in 2007. 71% of reported abusers threatened, harmed, or killed animals. So risk factors may be used, and there is an actual risk assessment tool, question and answer tool. If it's being used as a preventive tool or to help inform how to respond to abuse or how to deal with animal abusers, that's fine. We just say never use it as a way of determining who's not an abuser. So basically, if someone's abusing animals, look further because it's highly likely that they're abusing people, human beings. And this next set of slides, I won't go through all of these because they're just lengthy, but I feel like if I give handouts, it's just a lot of paper. So a lot of this is just to take and think about, but some of the lethality and dangerousness risk factors are here, and you can look at them. Basically, there's a higher risk of lethality according to this particular study among perpetrators who abuse animals. They're more likely to commit dangerous violence and homicide against human victims. So I just included a list of those, and I don't want to go through too many of them. The other important thing to note if you're dealing with victims who go into family court or criminal court for orders of protection is that animals can be added to the order of protection. So an abuser can actually be ordered to stay away from the pet just as he or she may be ordered to stay away from the victim, partner, the children, any workplace, school. We just actually had someone call our office last week who wasn't aware of that, so I don't know if it's common knowledge, but it's good to keep in mind, especially since abusers will often use the pet to get to the victim, like I need to pick up the dog, or I need to bring the dog to the victim. So they'll try to use that pet as a link to stay connected. This I'm going to skip through a little bit, but this one bullet I thought was interesting. There was a study done some time ago about links to behavioral characteristics with violent and homicidal behavior, and animal cruelty was at the top of the list. So again, this is not just sort of an isolated behavior where somebody hurts animals. There clearly is a link between animal cruelty and more violent homicidal behavior. So I won't go through all the details of serial killers because it's like late at night and you want pizza, but this is just good to look at and think about that, I thought that was interesting too during childhood. Serial killers could not retaliate toward abusers, so they chose weak, vulnerable animals, and that's kind of what we're finding with children now who are exposed to animal abuse as children. So this is the really important part, I think, of what can we do. How can, so this is all great information, but how do we respond and what do we do when we go into homes and deal with families? And I really liked this quote. This was written in 2000, so we're kind of a decade beyond this, that we've really begun to examine cruelty to animals as a human problem, not just an animal problem, and that it affects all of us, and it's connected to everything that we're talking about tonight. Animal cruelty is a statutory offense, and I put some legal information in the next couple of slides, so I'm just going to scan through them just so you can see what is on the books in terms of laws. There's a misdemeanor and a felony cruelty statute for animal cruelty. So those are there. There were also, these are just some of the laws that I pulled out of agriculture and markets law, abandonment of animals, carrying an animal in a cruel manner, various other types of behaviors that an abuser might engage in animal abuse. This is another set of laws from the penal law. Again, just to show that they're there, they exist, there are ways of responding. And none of us likes to think of pets as property. I mean, I don't like to think of my dog as property, but in the eyes of the law, he is my property. And in the eyes of the law, my partner, that's shared property. So damage to my property, there could be legal response to that, criminal mischief, things like that. So this is just, again, to just sort of reiterate all of these potential, these possibilities where we have animal cruelty. Stalking, again, using the animal, the victim in immediate fear. Sexual misconduct, we just had a big case down in Albany where that actually happened, and it was horrible, and it was videotaped. So I mean, there was a whole, they got very creative with the response to that, but it was actually cattle. And we're always talking about domestic animals, dogs and cats and things, but two young men were sexually assaulting a field of cattle. And the farmer videotaped it because he noticed that the cattle were acting funny, they were producing milk, and my thought was, you have to really do something pretty awful to a humongous cow. I mean, that would be so troubling that they would stop functioning. So he videotaped it, and he caught these two guys, and I'm not even sure what the outcome has been, but I never like to think of that one, and there it is, and it's there frequently. It's there more frequently than we might like to think. So, the other thing to think about when working with victims and families is that pets are often barriers to safety, and that's unfortunate. But when you think about it, victims often won't leave. They've reported living in their cars. They've refused to leave their homes, or they've returned to their homes because that pet was not safe. Its life had been threatened, or other pets have been killed. Oftentimes children will tell you that, we had this pet and that dog and that cat, and they're not here anymore, I don't know what happened to them. So, victims will often stay because of the pets. This was just a recent study. One of the things that we've been focusing on in our office is that victims wanted their vet or safe affordable housing, and one of the issues right now is that shelters are trying to become pet friendly. There's a one I think out in Ohio that's spreading, and we have one or two in New York City where domestic violence shelters are actually adding sort of a pet facility to the shelter. So to try to break down that safety barrier so that victims and children can leave and bring the pets with them and not have to leave them at home with the abuser. Again, another thing to consider is that victims are often reluctant to talk about their own abuse, but they may be willing to tell you about what's going on with the pets. So if you're in a home and you're asking direct questions like, did your partner hit you? They may not be able to answer that because the partner may be sitting right there. So they're probably not going to tell you, yes, absolutely. They may say no, or they may refuse to answer. But they may be willing to say, you broke the dog's leg, or you've got to give my cat help, or whatever. And children are the same way. Children are really compassionate when it comes to their pets, but they may have been trained not to tell, what happens to the other parent or what goes on between the adults in the house. So those are really good sources of information if you're doing interviews or you're trying to get information from children or even the victims themselves. Including questions about threats or injuries to current or former pets on intakes and questionnaires. That can be really good to try to establish a history of what's gone on in this family, what's gone on in the house, because sometimes you'll have the abuser with a different victim. So if you can try to kind of get a sense of what's been going on historically, there may be no criminal history. By the time somebody calls the police, this has usually been going on for years and years, and there is nothing on paper, there is nothing on record. And including pets in the safety plan. If victims are planning to leave and they're developing a safety plan, talking to them about where are their pets going to go, how can we get them to a safe place, how can we make sure all of their records are with them. We talked about adding them to the orders of protection. And then just, again, prevention and response, you know, reporting abuse and the screening, talking about are there animals at home. If you go into a home and you may see the animal, but you may just see like an animal toy, you know, a dog toy or an old bed or an old food dish or something that tells you there are animals in the house and things don't look kosher. So just talking about those things and asking if they're worried about the pets. When you're asking about other things, are you worried about the kids? Do you feel unsafe? What about the pets? You know, where do they sleep at night? What do they eat? Who feeds them? Who takes care of them? When was the last time they went to the vet? Things like that. Not to turn it into an animal investigation, but just to kind of give you a sense of who's got control in this house, who's making the decisions, what kind of decisions are they making. I know that there are strong task forces in this county, so again, just inviting, and I know we have animal, is there animal cruelty. Thank you. I was going to think it was animal control. So that's great. So that's done. That you guys are already collaborating, cross-training and cross-reporting. Again, it's just really important, and I think you guys are. So, I mean, just kind of in conclusion, and I know that was a lot, and it was fast, but just sort of wearing your own hat when you go into a home or a family, but trying to kind of keep a sense of other hats too. Who do I know that's a resource? Who can I refer to? What kinds of questions can I ask that might get me to information that I may not get directly by just saying, like, are you being abused? And that's pretty much it. These are some great resources. I cited all of these organizations, so you can go to them when you have time. And they each have, and these are just all the studies that I cited because I like research. That's it. This is my contact information, and if you want any more like in-depth or involved information, training, or whatever, more we can do longer. We have police trainers, and we have, you know, all kinds of things in our office. So feel free to call me anytime you want more elaborate information. And, that's my dog. It's a little nepotism, but he made it in at the end. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Heather made some great points regarding animal abuse and the connection, that link between animal abuse and domestic violence. It's gone, part of our task force is to bring awareness to that and to try to get that out there, not only amongst ourselves, but to the judges, to the bar in general, the legal community, and the medical community. And one of the things we keep talking about is documenting. And I guess I'm taking that for granted that everybody knows what I mean by that. And I've spoken to many of the EMS workers, and some of you I've had contact with in criminal cases. How many of you here, as far as the first responders are concerned, have ever testified in court, whether it be a criminal case, a grand jury, a civil case, or a family court case? Okay. And how many of you have had to prepare for such a proceeding? Okay, I better see those. And why that's important is our burden as prosecutors, from a criminal perspective, is our burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a very, very high burden. And I know when the law enforcement are in the academies and we come out and we talk about documenting, there's this fear that whatever you write down is going to get into the hands of the defense attorneys. That it's a bad thing. That if you write it down, oh my gosh, someone's going to know about it. I can only urge you as much as possible from our standpoint to document, document, document. Write it down. Observations from an objective standpoint, not your opinions, but what you're observing. So if you go into that household and you see a child or a pet that you're observing, oh man, this does not look good. Why doesn't it look good? Write what you're observing down in a very factual, objective way. And why that's important is because sometimes court cases don't go to court for a year, 2 years later. Are you going to remember all the way back to that incident and remember those observations and those details? Probably not. If you write it down, you have that resource to go back and look. And this became very important for the case over a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And it was a first responder showed up. It was a call-in, appeared to be an apparent domestic violence case, didn't know what they were expecting. Because of the documentation, and what I mean by that, because the EMS wrote down, in quotations, what the alleged victim was saying about the perpetrator and what happened to her, we were able to get an attempted murder charge and a conviction with a plea. Because of those statements, because we were able to show intent. And without that, we probably would have been struggling to get there. So it's very important to document and get that stuff written down. And we get your records when we proceed to a criminal case or a family court case, we're able to get those records. When we sit down to prepare you with your for your testimony, you're able to read that. If you're up on the witness stand, I'm able to show you that to refresh your recollection. It's so much easier than having to struggle to try to remember what you were observing. So those standards are very high, very different. So when I'm sitting here listening to everybody speak, I'm thinking of it from a prosecution standpoint. But from your perspective, you're going in there probably for a course of treatment. What are you going to do to treat that? That's great. Write it down. Because those observations, those statements that that victim is making to you go to what she's going to need or he's going to need for treatment. So write it down. And referrals. If you suspect what's going on in the household, you're not sure, gee, should I call NCPS? Should I call, the dog enforcement officer? Should I call, pick up the phone? All of us in my office have cell phones. We have email. We're accessible. Bob Rice with the Sheriff's Department pretty much responds to almost all of the animal control cases, and I'm sure the troopers will call him up too because he's trained in that area. He's also on the task force. So there's a lot of resources that are out there. Just, as you're here, ask those questions, and before you leave, if you have a question about who you should be calling, talk to us so we know that when you leave here, you have that wealth of information. That's what we're here for, to make sure we're all coming at it from a different objective or standpoint, but the ultimate goal, and sometimes it's going to be a prosecution in a criminal case, we want to make sure we have the best case possible. So that's what we mean by documenting, writing it down, not just observing it, but make sure you put it somewhere where you're going to be able to reflect on it later on. And one more other point, animals are a huge, huge component in any kind of therapeutic and or prosecution standpoint. The child advocacy centers that you always hear about that we're trying to get in Essex County as part of our multidisciplinary team effort in child sexual abuse cases is using animals, therapeutic. There's many times I'd sit on the floor with a child victim, just petting the dog, talking, and it just opens them up. They learn to trust. And that gives you that opportunity, even if you're responding to the household and you're talking to a child, one who might be attending to what's going on in the house and you're outside with the kids, bring it up. So how many pets do you have? Oh, really? How many pets have you had? Well, where is that dog? Where is that cat? What happened to that fish? There's all sorts of things that you can talk. What are their names? It can be very innocent questions, but you're going to get a wealth of information from those kids. And every interview that I do with children, we always talk about the pets. And it gives you that, well, I have a pet too, and this is what my dog's name is, and this is what he likes to do. And then they, oh yes, well, I remember one time he did that, and Daddy did not like that. Hung it up by its collar on the wall. I mean, there's all sorts of things that come out. They don't realize they're telling you what we're going to need to basically prosecute the case, because that's a trust thing. So animals can be used also in a positive way for law enforcement and or even in EMS. So, but document. That's what I'm saying. Write it down. Anything the child says, anything anybody at the scene says, and your own observations. So that when you go back a year later, you're able to talk about it and testify. Okay. Okay. Next. Yeah.
Diane. Yeah. Go ahead.
My name is Jessica Hartley. I'm the executive director of the North Country SPCA. I just wanted to let everybody here know about a new program that we're.
Can you stand up?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. We're in the very beginning phases of starting what we're calling a safe haven program. Heather mentioned that a large barrier to victims of domestic violence leaving an abusive situation is they don't know what to do with their pets. They're afraid for their pet safety. At the shelter, we want to start a program where victims of domestic violence have a safe place to bring their animals so that they can actually get themselves out of an abusive situation. So this is kind of, you know, the, the first announcement of this program. Like I said, it's not quite off the ground yet, but it's an initiative that we want to get rolling soon, and I thought everybody would really want to know about it.
Thanks, and just so you know, I work at Stop Domestic Violence, and we don't always have the funding, but if we do, we will attempt to get a pet to a safe place to have it, what's the word I'm looking for? Kennel, thank you, for up to a week. We can do that if we have the funding, and we have done it in the past. And I know our director has spoken to Jessica about this Safe Haven program that they're starting. So just so you know, that is a possibility if we have funding.
And we do allow service.
And we do not allow any pets in our safe house for obvious reasons, allergies or whatever. However, if it's a service animal, we have to, you know. But we do allow service animals in our safe houses.
Diane was on the agenda. I think that's because when we first started out, we were going to throw her underneath the bus to talk. But I'm sure if you have any questions for her specifically, after she'd be happy to entertain them. She's come over to the dark side. She's now an EMT, so we'll have to do that too. So what I want to say before we get into having Linda speak is there's pizza in the back, and there's water and soda and stuff in the back. It looks like cookies. If you want to take like 5 quick minutes to go get yourself something to eat and then come right back, we'll get started with the next speaker. So our next presenter is Linda Jackson. She's a supervisor from Essex County Child Protective Services. I think that's got to be like one of the toughest jobs in the whole world is dealing with kids and situations like that. But probably learn to cope with like we do some of our calls. So I'm going to have you come on up and tell us a little bit about what you guys do and how's your life.
I'm Linda Jackson. I supervise Child Protective Services for Essex County. We are responsible for any reports that get made of child abuse or neglect in our county. We have approximately between 650 and 700 reports annually investigate. And of those, about 80% of them are not found to be substantiated. Now that seems like a really high number, but we're only required to have parents meet a minimal degree of care. And that's a hard thing for people to understand. What that means is that all you have to provide is food, clothing, shelter, and supervision and medical care for your children. You don't have to love them. You don't have to take them to Disneyland. You don't have to hug them. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So many of the reports that we get, we're not able to substantiate that there is an immediate danger of serious harm to the child. And that's what the definition of abuse is. So it is a difficult job in a lot of ways because of those kind of skills. But we're also charged with helping families. So just because we get a report of child abuse and neglect doesn't mean that we're going to go running into the house and remove the child. And I know there's some misunderstanding about that sometimes. But all the statistics that we have found indicate that children are better growing up in their families, barring some very serious issues. So the outlook that we have is we prefer to prevent things from happening or to stop the cycle right now before it gets more serious. We do that in a number of ways. One is that we have preventive services. Those services include parent aids, they include some transportation, they include a caseworker who can coordinate, they include helping people get hooked up with services. And in addition to that, there are other services that we refer people to, like mental health and like St. Joe's and just rehab, etc. What we find that if we can get into a family early enough, we can prevent a lot of things from becoming more serious than they would have. We don't know what the statistics are as far as preventive goes because we don't know what didn't turn into child abuse and neglect. We put these services in there and we know that some families are doing better. Families that might have in the past not known how to parent because they grew up with parents who didn't know how to parent. It's a very vicious cycle in a lot of ways. Of course, as far as the reports that we get concerning domestic violence, many of the reports that come in do involve some degree of domestic violence. However, it may not come in that way. It doesn't come in saying that mom is beating up dad in front of the kids. But during the course of our investigation, we discovered that there's a lot more going on in the house than we thought that there was. That's a matter of establishing relationships with people. We have to be able to get people to trust us in order to give us the information that we need. So when you think of Child Protective Services, often you think of those mean caseworkers who come in and break up families, and the ones on TV that they have those suits and their hair's back in a bun, and the first thing they do is yank the kid and say, "You're out of here, that's it. You're never coming home again." Well, that's not okay. One of the really hard things to deal with is the fact that children often will protect people who abuse them because that's their family. That's the person they love. And they love them regardless of if we think they're worthy to love them or not. And it's what they know. When we look at incidents where there is some kind of abuse going on in the family, we find that children often will not tell us about it, will make it less serious than it is, or if they tell us about it, they'll back down when they see us coming because they see that there's going to be consequences. Nobody wants to see dad get hauled away in handcuffs, and nobody wants to see themselves having to leave their home, which is what happens in a lot of situations, and is really not fair because it's not the child who has caused the problem, it's the parent or the caretaker, and they don't have to leave their home. The effects of domestic violence on kids are very long-lasting. We find that it's a cycle that's very difficult to break, but of children who have experienced domestic violence during the time that they were children, they're 2 to 5 times more likely to perpetuate that violence on their own wife or children as they get older. Something like 10 million kids are exposed to some form of domestic violence annually, and that's just a huge percentage. When you talk about domestic violence, it can mean so many different things. And for kids, often it doesn't even have to be anything physical. It's something emotional. And that's really one of the hardest things for kids to deal with. They can't trust their parents to provide for them. They can't trust their parents to keep them safe. They can't trust their parents to make sure that no one in the home is hurting them. So when they don't learn to trust, it affects the rest of their lives. It affects their ability to relate to other people. It affects their ability to have healthy relationships. It affects their ability to know how to parent their children when they have children. And so we'll see generations and generations of things like that happening. Talking about the animal abuse, abuse that we just heard about too, that can be fairly subtle, or it can be really out in the open. I can tell you one instance where we had several years ago, a child, 2 children, and the caretakers were both abusive towards the children, and this was a sexual abuse case actually. And the children were told that they needed to obey, they needed to do what they were told to do, or someone would get hurt. And so what the perpetrator did was that he got a cat for the little girl, and he named the cat after the little girl. And then he killed the cat right in front of her. What's the message you get from that? And in addition to that, he also cut off the ear of her grandmother who was there. So she certainly got the message that you need to do what he says, or something really bad is going to happen to you. I want to give you a little update on that story, though. This young girl is now grown up. She has 2 children of her own. She's a productive citizen. She got a lot of counseling, and that speaks to the resilience of some children, which they don't all have. This one in particular did. The other instance is more recent, and that involves some children who we've heard about numerous times over the years. One of the children is a teenage girl, and she's getting into a lot of trouble at school, and she's just not doing very well. And she would occasionally go to one of her teachers or one of her counselors, and she would say that her father was beating her up. So we would get a report, and we'd go out, and we'd talk to her, and we'd talk to everybody in the family, because that's what we do, along with collaterals. And by the time we got there, she wouldn't say a word. She wouldn't say anything to us. So we didn't have anything to go on. There was nothing that we could do, because she was not telling us that anything was happening. But she'd run away from home. She was unruly and difficult to control. So that kept going on. Recently, another child in the family reported that there was violence going on at home. At that report, and this child did tell us that indeed that was occurring. And what she said was that the way that Dad controlled them was not physically. He didn't hit them, he didn't hurt them, but he threatened to hit their mother. He threatened to hurt their mother if they didn't do as he said. And he actually did that in front of them at one point. He had his mother down on the ground. He was just, and he was just kicking her. And the kids were there. There was nothing that they could do about that. Kids who witness those kind of things have a really hard road to hoe. Our job is to try to break that cycle. And in this particular case that I just mentioned to you, I think we might have an in at this point. One of the things that we are strong proponents of is the safe and together approach to domestic violence, which is, I think Nikki's very familiar with that. In the past, what's happened is that children, or that mothers, usually mothers, because most of the abusers are men, when there's a report made that there's a child being abused and it's by this domestic violence guy, the mothers have been told, look, you either get him out, you leave, we're taking your kids away. And what we're doing is victimizing the victim when we do that. What we have learned over the years is that the mother is the most able to protect those children, because she knows this guy. She knows that when he comes home and he's drinking, that's a sign that she should put the kids away from him. She knows that certain ways that he acts are a prelude to something about to happen. She also can make plans that will protect the kids, even though it doesn't look us like she's doing it. she thinks that something's going to happen. They kind of have a sign, and the kids know, get out of the room, go to your bedrooms, don't say a word to him. And that oftentimes does work. But she is the one with the most knowledge about this person. And with that knowledge, she is the most able to protect those kids. Does that mean that we want them to stay there and continue to undergo that? No, of course not. But we can offer alternatives along with Stop Domestic Violence and sometimes law enforcement. We can assist them in finding other ways to deal with this. Lots of times women don't leave because they don't have the financial means, they don't have they have no place to go, they have no supports. Their kids are in a particular school, their friends are there, they don't want to leave that school. So those are difficult things to deal with. What we can do is assist them with signing up for services if they need that, for temporary assistance or Medicaid or whatever it is. We can help them with housing. We can supply a parent aide who can go in and work with the family and help them to find alternative ways to deal with things. And we make referrals to mental health, we make referrals to the long-term effects for kids who grow up in that kind of environment is it's difficult. They don't have trust in adults. They don't learn how to have a healthy relationship because they've never seen one. And oftentimes they feel worthless. They feel damaged. They feel they're not valuable. And because of that, they go on to have relationships that are often repetitive, repeating the same relationships that they grew up in. Sometimes they just give up. They don't look for jobs. They don't go to school. They don't think they have any value in themselves. So we want to break that cycle, and we're all working in this together to do that. As first responders, you are the people who go into homes very often before anybody else. And I know that when you go in there, you're not thinking about, what else is going on in the home. You're thinking about a person that I've got to deal with who's ill or whatever it is. But even though that's true, you still are in a position to observe things around you. And, we can all do more than one thing at a time. So even though we're working on somebody, we might look up and see there's a pot pipe on the table. And, that's something should raise some red flags in your mind. Or you see children who are kind of cowering, they're holding back, they're staying away, and they're watching, they're very hyper vigilant, they're watching their parents to make sure that they're not about to walk into a situation that's not safe for them. Things like, are there toys around for the kids? Is the home, does it look like it's comfortable? Or does it look like there's trash all over the place and dishes everywhere and kids who are in soiled clothes and dirty diapers and animal feces and things like that? You'll notice those kind of things. When you notice things like that, you're all mandated reporters, and y'all know that. I assume you all know that. You've all been trained. That means that in your professional capacity, you are required to make a report to the State Central Registry if you see something that gives you cause or concern that something is occurring in that house. Even if you're not sure, pick up the phone and call the registry. The worst that will happen is that they'll say, no, that's not enough. Most of the time they will take those reports. If you're not comfortable doing that, call us. I'm going to give you a number with some numbers on it that you can reach us at. I would like to say that sooner is better than later. So I know you're busy, I know you're going in, you got things to do, maybe it's near the end of your shift or whatever it is that you're doing. But if we don't get those reports in a timely manner, we are at a disadvantage. because our mandates are that we have to begin our investigation within 24 hours, and we have to assess safety. We have to make sure those kids are safe. We don't get a report till 2 days later. We don't know if that child was safe at that time, even if they are now, and is this going to occur again? And do we have anything that we can go to court on if we need to? Most of the cases that we deal with, we don't go to court on, but there are occasions when we need to do that.
I think the EMS folks.
Shut up.
You need to report.
Shut up, that's
Listen up.
You got it.
With the EMS folks, I think you guys have to report within 24 hours. You know, there's that 800 number that we talked about during class and whatnot. Well, my question to you is so once we call into the 800 number, whether or not they take a report or not, what happens with that report or that information? Do you guys get notified like right off? So in case we think it's a safety thing?
When you call the state central registry and they decide that this is indeed a case that needs to be registered, they notify us immediately. So it probably takes 45 minutes or so from the time that they take a report until it comes to us. It comes electronically. On the weekend, we have 24/7 coverage. So on the weekend, if you get a report, the dispatch here actually has the number for the on-call caseworker, and they contact the caseworker. But once a report is registered, then it comes to us. Well, usually, we often will try to contact the family first, depending on what the issue is, because that is our best case practice, and that it works better to engage people from the beginning than to walk into their homes and say, I'm serious. But we also want to be able to contact the source. So if you're calling in a report and it's, midnight or whatever, and you're going out to shift, we're not going to get your phone numbers. Please leave an alternate contact. Because we need to make sure that the information that we're getting is the information you actually meant to give. It doesn't always come out the same way. So it's really important that we do it. And we won't give that number out to anybody else. Once the report comes in, we have 24 hours to begin our investigation. It's very rare that we wait 24 hours to begin the investigation, depending on each circumstance. And at that point, during those 24 hours, we have to do an assessment to make sure that these kids are safe. And that can involve going directly to the home to check that out. It can involve asking the police to do a welfare check. It can involve phone calls, talking to people who are in a position to know that the child is safe. Like Grandma has the child right now, and she can say he's okay, he's not. If they don't take the report, I think you have the 22, 21 forms.
Yeah.
You should fill out one of those forms, even if they don't take the report, and send it to us. And the reason for that is, if sometime in the future something awful happens, and they say, well, you didn't make a report, you knew about this and you didn't do anything, we have that report to indicate that indeed you did, and they can take it.
And I would keep a copy stapled right to the PCR sheet, because that way you can prove that you guys did that, because it's a legal document. Any questions for Linda?
Jamie Martineau from the DA's office, but I'm actually, I don't know if it's a question or an observation, but for years I was an attorney for children in family court, and one of the problems I see with the way the system is, and maybe you pipe in and let me know if you agree or disagree, but it's the ability of people to call in anonymous complaints to CPS, and what it does is allows parents who are separated to use the system against each other when there's not really a problem going on, and then it leaves people who really do need the system to help them out in the cold. Because if they don't have to give their name, they'll just call and say, hey, all this kid's being beat up on, or just to try to get play in family court for custody, or
Well, regardless of the report that we receive, whether it's anonymous or not, we still have to investigate. So there was one case recently where we got 42 reports, 42 anonymous reports on the same issue. And every time that report came in, we had to go out and re-interview people, we had to go out and traumatize people. And that part of the system stinks. on the other hand, every report that comes in gets investigated. So even if it is somebody who really does need help, we're not going to ignore them because we're out busy, we're busy investigating those other reports. But it is, child custody issues are really difficult because people are always calling each other in. It makes it hard for the kids too.
Well, and you get, and again, you said it's usually the mother who's the one that's victimized, but you get abuse and neglect cases where the father's the abuser, he's doing something to the children, he's also abusing the mother, so she's afraid to say anything, so he gets charged with abuse, she gets charged with neglect for not protecting the children. And it makes it difficult. She can't, she's in fear.
I think that's what, that was the point I was trying to make when I was talking about the safe and together. That has been the traditional approach, that, you're not protecting your children, so you're guilty too. And now it's you are protecting your children as best you can. So how can we help you make a plan that will protect your children instead of going in and taking an court and doing it with your kids? Yeah. So it's definitely a difficult thing to deal with. Yes.
I'm Carol Hayes. I'm with the District Attorney's Office. I'm a victim advocate there, and I'm retired from Lake Placid PD. With the mandated reporter form, everybody gets very scared and concerned about it. The biggest thing is that when you talk to those operators, you might have a question. You might seem like the smallest thing in the world, but you know what? That operator, that might be the little bit of a break that day from the other reports they're getting. They will answer your questions. You can tell them this is what you have. They're not going to condemn you for calling. Just realize that you could be that step for that child. And the best thing to do is the form. I always told my guys, fill it out before you call them because they're going to want the names. And if you're sitting there trying to go through all your forms to try and find it, it's just easier to do that form out ahead of time, have it done. And if they don't take the report, just ask for their name. They'll give it to you, write it down. But if there's some gut feeling also that you have that something is really wrong, make sure you say, well, I'd really like to talk to a supervisor. They will let you talk to a supervisor, and you could tell the supervisor what your concerns are. So if it's some gut feeling that you have, just make that request to go up to one more level.
Those gut feelings we believe in, but we cannot do anything without a report. So if we don't get it, even if you're sure something's happening, they don't take it. There's nothing you can do. Yes.
Yeah, from what you were saying at the very beginning of your talk, I was under the impression that when it comes to the legal definition of abuse, that emotional neglect or cruelty was part of that definition.
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's abuse and there's maltreatment, and there are different categories under each of those. So inadequate guardianship, lack of supervision, educational neglect, emotional neglect, those things. I do have a definition of abuse and neglect I'm going to pass out to you. And the last thing I want to say is that I do have, charts of who's who in our organization. There's a small one, and that shows my children's services and adult services that can run there too. And those are their lists of people that you can contact. We have 9 caseworkers right now, 2 seniors, and even with that, it's really tough. But I want you to know how it all works and how it's all set up. And please feel free at any time. If you don't know, if you have a question about something, give me a call. My number's listed on there. If you can't reach me, call one of my seniors. There are several numbers on there. So thank you for all you do. We appreciate it very much, and we know that you're in difficult positions at times. So thank you for what you do.
Okay. So I know it's warm in here. Take 5 minutes, get move around.
I'll let you know.
Start again.
You gonna pay it all? Okay. Okay. So, for those who don't know me, which is mostly over that way, I'm Patty Basha. I'm the. No, I was gonna pick on you. You cannot.
I heard it. He knows you.
That's not right.
That is
Well, I was gonna leave. examples, but anyway. I'm Patty Basha, I'm the EMS coordinator for the county, and that's one of my loves. And my other love is working for the Office of the Aging. I've been doing it a little over 27 years. And it's just been a great gig, and hopefully we'll carry on a couple more years of that. And so what I'm talking about to you guys today is really passionate for me. I do have a couple of cases, and I know Roseboro, Essex has a case too that we'd like to talk about. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do my blurb, and then at the end of this, the end of the presentation today, will be on, all right, what's some exchange that we can do, how can we better make sure we get these cases reported, even if it's just, just to me or to staff or somebody else. So anyway, we're talking about elder abuse and neglect. And this will answer some of the questions somebody asked about the different categories. So this may help clear some of that up. So what is elder abuse? An all-inclusive term representing all types of mistreatment. It's not just somebody beating the crap out of somebody. There's neglect and a whole bunch of other things that we're going to about. Further defined as acts of omission, intentional behavior, or omission, failure to act. So sometimes we'll go to somebody's home and we get in there and they haven't changed their clothes in like 5 days, easy. And you look in their refrigerator, because I do that. You guys look in people's refrigerator? Why not? Well, so you go pick up somebody with altered mental status, and you want to see if they're eating, and what happens if it's full of home-delivered meals that aren't open? Are they eating? I went to somebody's house one time, opened the door, and it was full of Reese's peanut butter cups. Nothing but Reese's peanut butter cups. And I'm telling you, there was probably 50 things in there. Are they eating appropriately? No. Is it because they can't afford it? Maybe. Okay, so, what's that? They're not cheating. They're not cheating. So anyway, so some of this stuff, is stuff that you can pick up on. Self-neglect is, when a person just doesn't take care of themselves. But you guys do know they have the right to do that, right? Every once in a while I'll get a call. Lake Placid is really good about it. I know Lou's called me a couple of times. I've got this person, she doesn't change her clothes like in weeks. You just go a path through the house, and that's how you get in to see her. Ty, for example, has got one down there that I bet you dispatch gets a call on her, I bet you multiple times during the day. If they choose to live that way, they have that right. Even though the consequences that they're making may not be the right ones or right according to us, we live in America, they have the right to choose that. Okay. So sometimes we really can't do anything for these folks. These are the types of abuses. Physical abuse is usually pretty obvious. Psychological abuse, sexual abuse. Yes, people abuse the elderly sexually. Okay. Material abuse, we'll talk about that because that one seems to be a pretty hot topic for my office. Violations of rights, medical abuse, or lack of medical care usually, or over-medicating people. Abandonment, neglect, and self-neglect. So we're going to talk about these. So at the end, we're going to talk about some signs and symptoms. So we're going to talk about some signs and symptoms you might pick up on when you're out in the field, with these folks. So physical forms of abuse. Hitting, pushing, slapping, punching, anything where the person, gets contact with something else. Anybody ever see somebody physically abused? A little bit of feedback. Yes. Okay. What type of circumstances is it usually? Who's the perpetrator usually? Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Caregivers. Why do you think caregivers get to that point? Yeah, frustration. And that's where I was going to throw Larry under the bus. So we'll talk about that in a second. Psychological abuse, verbal aggression, intimidation, threats, and humiliation. Thank you. I think Linda talked about that a little bit. Intimidation. I'm going to kill the cat if you act wrong. You would not live in my house. That would be abuse on my end. But psychological abuse, sexual abuse, any kind of non-consensual sexual contact. Doesn't have to be just the sex act. It could be groping, touching, that type of thing. So sexual abuse certainly does happen. We hear about that every once in a while. Material abuse. This is what we see a lot of in our office. We get people who call up and say, I know that that grandchild is stealing grandma's money. And we go and look at the accounts, and sure enough, they're starting to dwindle. Now, if grandma gives that person the credit card and knows this is going on, is that a crime?
No.
No, it's, oh my God, they're taking care of me, you know, they wouldn't do anything like that. It's that type of thing. So we do see material abuse happening more often than not these days. We have I was going to wait for this story, but I'll tell you it now. We have a client currently who we deliver home delivered meals to. What's awesome about home delivered meals?
You see the refrigerator.
What's that?
You see that refrigerator.
Somebody can see that person each and every day. They get
Yeah,
in their car.
Monday through Friday, so 5 days a week, somebody is literally in that home giving Mrs. Smith her home delivered meal. Okay? Now, Mrs. Smith doesn't come to the door because the grandson comes to the door and says, oh no, she's sleeping. Does that meal get delivered? Hell no. No, no, no. We need to see Mrs. Smith, even if we just say, hey, are you okay back there? This person that we have right now, we have 2 grandkids living in the home, and there's this lady, we know for sure, we're pretty sure, we don't have obviously evidence, we're pretty sure that there's at least some financial abuse going on. We think there's some physical abuse. We think that there's definitely some emotional abuse. The reason, and I'm so glad that you're here tonight, because the reason she won't come out of that house is she's got a big, humongous dog that she will not leave because she's afraid something's going to happen to it, or she can't go anywhere that will accept the dog. She won't, when we meet with her, we have to meet with her in the car outside in the driveway, and she'll tell the outreach worker things, but as soon as the family's back around again, there's no further discussion on that. So what can we do to help get her out of the house?
Shoot to death.
Well, now we possibly have the SPCA who might be able to take this animal. I still think we might be hard pressed to get the dog out of the house because I'm certainly, no offense, because I got one of my dogs. I'm not going to leave my only thing that gives me love in a kennel somewhere, probably. Maybe Larry would, but. So.
Patty, who are the kids that are in the house? I mean,
Grandchildren.
so it's her house. How old are these?
No, actually, she's moved in with them because she can't take care of herself anymore. Yeah. So that's another reason. This is my only way of, somebody taking care of it. Yeah. So it's really, really a tough issue. Medical withholding medications and over-medicating. Why would they over-medicate somebody? I have sundowner's disease. What's that? No, don't freak it. Right? No, what's sundown? Well, kind of sort of. Yeah, they're wanderers. All night long, they're out wandering around. You guys might find them walking down the road. A guy came in not too long ago, and he had fallen the night before. He'd gotten out of the house like 2 o'clock in the morning, had wandered down the road, fell, took a header. Family found him, thank God. Got him home, and then we saw him the next day because he had some issues. But, sundowner's disease gets pretty annoying. If I'm up every single night and then I have to go to work the next day, how do I cope with that? So I'm going to over-medicate you so you're going to sleep tonight so I can get a good night's sleep. Do you blame them? Not really. Is it the right thing to do? Obviously not. So there's some, what's that? Yeah, it's abuse. So maybe there's some
control setting in the hospital. You can't let them out of the hospital or run around. They must do something.
Put them in unit 3 and lock them.
So lock the house up.
We have bands with sensors on them so they get supposed to.
In Middlebury, Vermont, they had an adult day home that is in a big square. So you can just wander all you want in a big square. And they do have a band on their leg, which you can obviously get for your own home. And in that place, you'll hear balloons going off if the person's near a wrong door, they can't go out. But a wander, the Willsboro new housing out there, same thing out there. If you notice your lockdown unit, they can wander in a square. There's no way out, but they can keep wandering. Good question. Now, why would they withhold medications? Oh yeah, I was gonna say troopers. Yeah, oxycodone.
use them in tows.
Yep, just get it out in the street, okay? So, again, what's that? Or is control. Yeah, if you start behaving, I'm gonna give you your medicine. Abandonment, desertion of elderly person, for whom they have agreed to take care of. This is dumping. I can't remember the story. I had a story to this one too, where the nephew was supposed to be taking care of the niece, I think, or the aunt, I think it was. It was an aunt. And everything was really nice and settled, and everything started settling down. And then all of a sudden we started getting calls again that, this lady's, got dementia, and you guys need to do something. And it's because the nephew was supposed to have done something and then just dumped her. Didn't take care of her. Neglect, there's nobody checking on them, there's nobody physically or mentally keeping an eye on them. And then self-neglect, behavior that threatens one's own health and safety. And some people do this just because they can't afford medications, for an example. They can't afford food, they can't afford heat. So when you guys get into the homes, the house is cold, they might be hypoglycemic because they haven't had their insulin, or they can't afford their food to buy the, money to buy the food, and it's self-neglect. Some people want to die. How many times have you been to somebody's home and they say, I don't know why I'm still here? What's up with that? I'm ready to go. And they may try to hasten that a little bit. Yes?
Does your office ever deal with patients that are in a nursing home, or is that not really important?
We used to. There is a program definitely for that, and it's the ombudsman program that the state administers. And we've had conversations with other agencies who have facilities in their area that have a question like, oh, that's ain't right. And there are so many regulations on nursing homes that you should never find somebody secured in a jerry chair anymore. They used to medically secure them in a jerry chair. It's kind of ironic. I think it's crazy, but you can't have bed rails up anymore. So when you get to like Placid to the U-line, you get in there and their bed's like way down on the floor. With pads out on the side, so if they rolled out, they're not injured. There are a lot of regulations, but the ombudsman program, if you need information, just give me a call and give you the number for that. In every single facility, when you walk in the building, there should be a big poster that gives you the name, and for most of us, it's Amy, I think it's Gowette, and her phone number. Psychological, withdrawn behavior, wasting or failure to thrive. These are the people that you'll see sometimes. There's a good gust of wind can blow them over. There's like nothing to them. Sexual abuse. I'm sorry. In general, these are indications. Genital injuries, vaginal or rectal bleeding, bruises, chipped teeth, sexual transmitted diseases. The elderly shouldn't get sexually transmitted diseases typically. Okay. I kind of skipped this a little bit. Physical abuse, any fractures. So you guys, we talked about this with child abuse. What might be a pattern you might see for abuse in the elderly, as far as maybe fractures? Different stages of bruising. Also, if you see patterns that are like crazy, like people shouldn't get a bruise, on their thigh or their butt necessarily. So why do they have a bruise on their butt or their thigh? Unless they're falling down the stairs. Material, unexplained loss of income, assets, possessions, not eating, missed utility payments. If you guys go in there and you guys see lumps of bills all over the house, they're probably not paid. If you're seeing that, give us a call. We can go in and help get that cleared up, hopefully, or get a caseworker in there. But that's another sign. You guys are like gatekeepers. The mailman's a gatekeeper. The state police are gatekeepers. You guys are gatekeepers. You're the ones that are in the home probably more than anybody else. And you can see if there's a dramatic change in somebody's condition or their home environment. Say something. Because God forbid you guys don't want to be the one where somebody gets hurt or dies, and then it's like, oh, I should have said something.
Hey, Patty, how do you handle a situation where you have like a couple who one is like being taken advantage of by like a niece or nephew, and the other one is not? Where, like, the father is the the gentleman in the marriage, the elderly man, is being taken advantage of by the niece and the nephew, you know, for money for drugs and that kind of thing. And the mother is resistant and wants it to stop, and you know, they've gotten CPS and APS involved, and it just goes on and on and on. I mean, what would be the best?
What I would tell you, what we would do is we'd probably go in and do a joint visit with Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services is limited 60 days, right? It's 30 or 60 days they have to open a case up. So what they'll do is they'll schedule visits and they'll do unscheduled visits. But it takes 30 to 60 days to open a case up. It's kind of crazy. If dad knows that it's going on and it's okay with him, then they're not going to do anything with him. If it's affecting her, then what we've done just recently because of all this is if we're in there, we have a HIPAA form, and we check everything, and we've added the state police and the DA's office now to the HIPAA form, and we'll probably run it now since we've got this relationship with these guys. We'd probably run it past these guys. And the other thing is, I can't stress, and I've even done this with my staff, documentation is so key, because if we can, here's a story, here's a story, here's a story, here's a story, and we keep feeding it back to these folks, you know, at some point, something's going to happen that they should be able to pick something up from it, I would say. It's really hard. Yeah.
What about the case, and now I'm not asking as a prosecutor, as a member of a local fire department, but we're getting called out with the ambulance, you know, 30 times in a 30-day cycle at 3 in the morning because the couple lives together, husband refuses to help her, and we're getting out of bed at 3 in the morning to go lift her off her commode because she's been sitting on it for 4 hours, and she's got sores and her legs aren't working, and he's sitting in the chair watching TV, and he calls us for that purpose.
This is an old case, right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what happened. We and Adult Protective multiple times went into the home and tried to get them to accept services. And it really came down to Adult Protective really did yeoman's work. And they got, who left first? They got her to get admitted to, I think, our local nursing home down here. And it just is constant going in there. And first of all, we got to gain the trust of the household. That's key. And then it's constantly going in there and keep suggesting and keep doing something. We are really lucky that nothing, and she had some bad situations, and nothing horrible happened to her. You know, and that's all. I mean, if they're self-directing and don't want to do something, then we really can't.
So it doesn't get to a point where you can actually consider him. I mean, he's, in my opinion, he's abusing her or neglecting her by, I mean, literally would leave her there for 4 or 5 hours at a time, and then call us to say, well, I finally called because I'm sick of listening to her yell to me to help her out. I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, he'd be out mowing the lawn or something like that. Yeah. Adult Protective is a higher case management level than us, so they have the legal responsibility over us. I'm not sure. It's too bad that they aren't here tonight. I'm not sure. You know what else they could have done with that case. I don't know. It'd been a good case to discuss with the DA's office to see if any charges could have been.
Yeah, by the time I got to the DA's office, the whole situation had resolved.
But it was a lot of hard work on Adult Protective.
Oh yeah, it was. It was on everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so material. Okay, violation of rights. They're isolated. So I'm thinking locking them in the house. Maybe not. If they're locked in the house and nobody's there, that's really a concern. Failure to attend church services. Some of the elderly, that's their only social event of the week, is getting out to the church. And if they all of a sudden stop going to church services, then that's really a big deal. Are you guys getting approved? Well, they've got an ambulance call. Do you guys need to go, or do they get approved?
David,
I don't know. Okay. So medical, no improvement in condition, which one was prescribed medication for. Blood tests indicate greater or lower than expected levels of medication. Years and years and years ago, we had this one man. There were times when the community living situations did not have to be certified. That's no longer really the case anymore. They have to be certified, and they're also watched by social services. So this one local place, and talking about everything that's been mentioned here already today, the place was run down. You thought the building was going to collapse. You walked into the room, and I think it was just one bed and maybe a dresser in there, and I don't even think there were sheets on the bed. And this guy was really wicked, wicked, wicked skinny, like nothing to it. He called, we got the ambulance call because he couldn't get out of bed. When we get there, he's altered. And when we go to roll him to get him onto sheets and stuff and move him to a stretcher, he's got bed sores on his back that are full of maggots. Is that neglect?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's somebody who owned the building, who was supposed to be providing him with meals and taking care of him, and he was basically just laying there to die. He was elderly. He was like in his 80s.
Veteran.
You know, a veteran. He was in his 80s, and that place was closed down after that. But again, if we don't get in there, how the heck are we going to know about these places? That's why I open refrigerators. Abandonment, isolation, not seen outside the house. If you go by the house and the grass starts growing and you see papers outside and you know, you drive by some of those houses and does it look like there's anybody living there? And there is. That's really a concern. Neglect, uncared for appearance, inappropriate clothing. Again, they usually live in their same clothing for days on end. They just stand up by themselves. Sometimes that's how soiled they are. And then self-neglect, which we kind of talked about. So the scope of the problem. So what do you think is going on? You think we've got a problem here in Essex County with elderly abuse? I think it's underreported. We have the baby boomers who are starting to turn 60 as we speak, actually last year. And this whole population is also going to be getting elderly, so it's going to increase our call volumes and whatnot. We have the sandwich population. Who's that? Okay, like you and me, who are taking care of our parents, and who may have kids at home. And who do you take care of? What a tug of war there is. Yeah, I need to run the parent or the kids. I need to run the kids to basketball practice, soccer practice, stuff like that. And then I need to take care of mom who's demented, and now I can't get out all the time because I'm afraid she'll leave the gas on at the house and burn something. So anyway, estimates of occurrence of elderly abuse vary widely. I think it's underreported for our county. Mistreatment of adults results, including abuse, neglect, and exploitation, affects more than 1.8 million older adults, older Americans. And self-neglect is 1/3 to half of that. Self-neglect. Elder abuse can be perpetrated, is that right? Perpetrated by nearly anyone, including paid and volunteers. One of the article I gave you is from Warren County, I think it is, Warren, Washington County. I think it's a murder, right? Is that the one I gave you? Where there was a paid person going in there, and she ended up they found out she was stealing money, and she killed the man that she was stealing from. So you know, that's just a county away. So it definitely can happen. And I stole this from the National Association of Adult Protective Services. This is national figures, but you can see the types of domestic elder abuse. Neglect is the big one, and then these are your other ones, but it's mostly done by adult children. And I know you people are sitting here thinking, oh, my kids would never do that to me. Okay? Be demented. Yeah. Be demented. Unlearn. Live with a demented person and not come to your wit's end once in a while. Okay? Spouse. So if I disappear tonight, please check on Larry and make sure he's not the perpetrator. Grandchildren, others, neighbors, stuff like that, other relatives, parents, siblings, service providers, which you see it is a pretty small amount, and then friends. But adult children usually are, and I think sometimes some of that is from frustration. So risk factors for being abused, the person's in poor health. You know, somebody is constantly losing their bladder and bowels every single hour or 2 or 3 times a day. And they're, you know, somebody got to change them. You can't just let them sit in that, right? What kind of life do you have? How are you getting out of the house? Okay. Inability to perform activities of daily living. What are those? Clothing's one, eating's one, dressing, bathing, that type of stuff. Cognitive impairment. Living with others. Living alone increases the risk for financial and self-abuse. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Social isolation, thank you. Depression, confusion, substance abuse, and dependency. So now they're demented and they're an alcoholic. Or they smoke. Okay. And they aren't going to get it. They aren't going to get that they have a problem because they have dementia. And then mental or physical impairment, stroke, incontinence, and Alzheimer's. If you guys ever get to listen to Linda Manzo from the Alzheimer's Disease Assistance Center, she spoke to us last year, I think it was. Particularly if you have somebody in your life who has Alzheimer's, you need to do that. Because people get so frustrated with that disease. Mom doesn't recognize me anymore, you know, she's trapped within her body. You need to really listen to her speak because it really tells you about how the disease progresses. And quite, I know this is going to sound weird, but quite frankly, it's not the person, it's the disease that's taken over. And I think if you can understand that, it helps you cope with that. So if you ever get a chance to listen to her, please take that opportunity. It was really, really good. Being a female, why is that? Because we outlive you guys. Seriously.
But you're demented.
We are. Yes, we are.
Is that singular? Is that singular?
Yes.
I know, but if you look at the population, you go to anything, go to church, any of the senior activities, it's mostly females. So the guys, if you guys are still hanging out, by the time you get older and you dump the wife, you're going to have like a 1 to 10 chance of finding somebody else. Over 85, again, just because you're more frail and there's more issues going on. Okay, so other risk factors. There's a history of family violence, and like Linda was saying, if we can break that cycle, that would be awesome because you know that they learn how to do that. That's what they're going to do as they grow up, as they get older. So it'd be great if we could break that cycle. Disruptive behaviors on behalf of the care recipient. You know, if you take somebody who's doesn't have a social filter anymore, how do you take them out to supper? Go out for a meal, or go out to see the kids play. So you know, it's more likely mental health. The elderly, do you think they like going, or not? I should say that. How do you think the elderly look at mental health?
It's still very much stigmatized.
Yeah, it's not like us. You know, everybody's got some type of mental issue. Seriously, the elderly really think of it as a stigma, as a I'm not crazy. You're not going to get me to go there. And sometimes if we can just get them in the door and start that treatment, oh my God, it's like night and day. But if we can't get them in that service, then sometimes it's a real big deal. Alcohol and drug abuse is a real big thing, and caregiver dependency. If they depend on that person, they could be abused. Stress, again, we talked about that already. Physical and emotional exhaustion, we kind of talked about that. I don't know how many people will come to our office and say, I just can't do it anymore. Well, that's the time not to come to the office. You need to come to our office for the aging, when you're planning to get to that point, I can't do it anymore. Because once you get there, we don't have services that we can just drop into the home. And let me just digress for a second, because I haven't done that through this whole lecture. I typically do. How likely is it, as we move forward, that people are going to be in nursing homes versus at home? Not likely. is very expensive. It's cheaper for the government to keep us home. That's where we want to be anyway, right? But keeping us home needs community services, and it needs the neighbors, and needs family commitment. If you think of your own family, how many people are near you, living near you? I'm working on a nieces and nephews to say, take care of your Patty. But you know what I'm saying?
I'm Florida, so.
Yeah, there is no leaving here. But you see what I'm saying? As more and more people are not here to take care of us, and we're all about our own, you know, our own being, you know, and there's not that community neighborhood thing going on anymore. I think we're really going to have some serious issues. Okay. Low self or social integration. That's probably one of our biggest problems with the elderly. And when do they get this this social isolation? When does that happen? What's that? Oh God, I hope not, because I'm looking at that. Oh, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe do some isolation. When you can't drive anymore. Think about it. Frank, I'm taking your keys away today, and you're relying on other people now to get around.
Thank you.
How you gonna drive them there? See what I'm saying? Wait till the day comes when somebody takes your keys away from you.
Get a horse.
Get a horse. See what I'm saying?
You're right.
What happens if you're not safe to drive anymore? What happens if they're not safe to drive anymore? You know? Yeah. Insufficient funds for basic needs. We have people coming into our office with budgets for their electricity of $600 a month of budget. Yeah. All right, so what can you do? Stay sociable and active. You know, make some community ties, because those might be the people that might have to take care of you, or at least give something back to you. You know, bring your mail and mow your lawn, or keep those social ties. Stay active. Get regular medical and dental care. Open and post your own mail. Open and post your own mail. Increase social network as you age. You know, the elderly, my mom's 70-something, and she's on social network. She's still working, for crying out loud. She's a nurse and she's still working. I think the social media is a really good way to keep in contact with people who aren't close by anymore.
That's what kids are going to.
No, she's got me.
No.
No, it's not abuse. Have friends visit you at home. Have a best friend with whom you can confide in. Keep in touch with old friends if you move. Now, this is hard. My grandma's 93. How many old friends does she have kicking around?
Yeah.
Not many. Keep your possessions organized. This is so important. And durable power of attorneys are really important. Tell someone you trust where your important papers are and your bank accounts are kept. Have the checks properly deposited. Don't have them come to your house. Using the answering machine to screen phone calls. Don't leave cash and valuables underneath the bed. We have somebody that does that. Notify police if you're away from the home for an extended period of time. And consult an attorney. Make arrangements for the future, and that needs to be a durable power of attorney, not just a regular power of attorney. Get that living will in place. Get your DNR in place if that's what you choose. Get your healthcare proxy chosen. Get legal advice before making and signing agreements, and be aware of your financial situations. Medical bills are so damn confusing right now. The elderly will just pay any bill that comes into the house. They'll send donations out to anybody. So, you know, if you're taking care of a parent or whatnot, keep an eye on that stuff. Know where to ask for help. This is all on here. I think there's a sheet going around to you guys. What I would just leave you with, just call somebody. We can take over 60 phone calls. Actually, we can take any age now, but you know, call somebody. I know a lot of you guys call me already. Barriers, detection of elderly abuse is because detection of elderly abuse is difficult because denial is an integral feature of abuse. The victim feels too ashamed. And I think this goes across the whole gamut of ages. It's not just the elderly. Dependence on an abuser. You know, these people, where else are they going to go? It's my kid taking care of me. I don't have a home anymore. Where am I going to go? Victims may not define their situation as abuse, especially in a dysfunctional family, because it's been dysfunctional the whole time. They can't even say anything. They can't see, they can't talk, they have dementia. They can't even help themselves. Ageism is negatively affected, can negatively affect detection of elder abuse, as it is common to view the elderly as confused and demented. Not everybody is hard of hearing, not everybody's demented. You know, you just sometimes have to give them a few minutes to get their response back out to them. And physical injuries are masked by clothing. If you see somebody wearing long sleeve clothing in the summertime, well, the elderly like to be warm, but maybe they're hiding some abuse. We get in there, we get out of there, we got something else to do, right? So we may not be paying attention to all the red flags, so please keep an open mind. Basic lack of information where to turn. Again, that should not be a problem in this county. You guys should know where to call, so don't be afraid to sing out. This is my referral contact. It takes all the referrals into our office. Seriously, if you don't want to speak to her, don't be afraid to give me a phone call, because I'll talk to anybody about this. And then call me at all or email me. Y'all got my email mostly, so you know, don't be afraid to give me a phone call. Any questions, you guys? No. Not after 9. Jamie?
Just talking about, you know, women living longer than men. I mean, you know why husbands die before their wives, right?
Go ahead.
Because they want to.
Any other questions or anything? Was this helpful for you guys? That was enthusiastic. Okay, so that's right. We have one case we want to talk about. Why don't you stand up so they can?
Assisted Living Center in Goldsboro, new organization. We get called there quite a bit. And we were called, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. Typical case. We don't do a real good primary assessment on scene because they've already done a blood pressure. They give us what's going on normally.
I always wondered, gosh, if I go out and we have to arrest the husband, the elderly wife is left there unattended, she can't live on her own. Will someone come out and render assistance?
The adult protective, they don't have
They don't have 24-hour coverage.
This is what I would do. Dispatch always knows how to get a hold of me. So just have them call me. I've had Dr. Davis called me one night because of something like that. He thought the husband was beating the wife. They were both in the ER, and it actually was the other way around. What do I do with them? You can always give me a phone call, and just go through dispatch. They can always get me.
I think also, because we have an on-call caseworker all the time, CPS, you can also call dispatch and someone from our unit will respond. We can get hold of somebody, and we do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, guys? All right, I'm letting you guys, we're getting out 45 minutes early. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. I appreciate it.